Coming to you from Aurora, Illinois, it's the DuPage Angling Network.
All right, welcome to the DuPage Angling Network, and tonight we're going to be talking about salmon fishing, fall salmon. Some of the best times I've ever had on the water was fishing for salmon, and I'll tell you, Dan, he's on the line tonight. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Good evening, Marty. Good evening, everybody.
I know that you've fished for salmon a few times in your life, and
yes, I have.
I'm sure you have a lot of stories, good and bad.
It's very, very true.
All right, but I do have limited salmon experience, but I tell you, my salmon experience is very consistent, to say the least. There was a time where I would go every single fall without fail, whether it was on shore, whether it was with hire a boat to go on Lake Michigan, whatever it was, we would always find the salmon. And I even came in first on a salmon tournament in the 1990s, at a coho tournament. I came in
Amazing.
first.
Amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was through Salmon Unlimited, and I'll never forget that day. It was so cool. And so I have a lot of salmon experience, but I'm not that great. But I go a lot, so I feel that I have a lot of things to share.
Yeah, I've been doing it since I don't know, my mid-20s, and my first salmon is actually one of my funniest stories. I went into Rob Kohler when he had his bait shop. Me and him were bait shop. We were good friends. And I'm like, dude, I really want to learn salmon. There's this gigantic guy sitting across the way, and he goes, well, you know what? That guy over there is salmon fishing. So I'm like, yeah, so? He goes, but he wants to learn some private ponds. He has no ponds, Mr. Pond Boy. So he goes, I think you guys should talk. So he comes over, and he goes, can I trust this guy? And I look at it, Rob, can I trust this guy? And he's like, yeah, of course. So we made the deal that I would take him out the private ponds for a week, and then for a week that we would go salmon fishing. So we started out on private ponds. We were doing some catfishing. I used to back reel all my fish. Just like to have the control. I didn't like to depend on my drag. I'd like to back reel. So as we started talking, he's like, Dan, just so you know, when we go salmon fishing, you can't back reel a salmon. You know, we were planning to go casting. It was early fall. They weren't in the rivers yet. And I'm like, okay. He goes, no, Dan, really, you cannot back reel a salmon. Okay. And he's like, you're not believing me, are you? He goes, if you can tie your line to the back of a Ford, and that guy floors it, and you can keep up, you can back reel a salmon. But you can't. It can't be done. So we're on our way there for the first time, and he says it again, and I literally look and I go, F you. You know, and he's like, all right. Well, at the time, I had one of the first Spyrex reels that came out. Now, a Spyrex reel has a double handle. So it not just has one place to hold, it has two, like a bait caster, but it's a spinning rod. So here I am. I didn't have any real salmon rods or reels yet. I had a 7-foot walleye rod and a Spyrex reel. And I threw on a flatfish, and I chucked it out there. My third cast, I hook into a fresh silver salmon. Now, when they first come in, they call them fresh because they're still silver and they still have energy. So this thing hits, and just out of instinct, not to spite my buddy, just out of instinct, I throw it in the back reel. Next was the most painful seconds I've ever had fishing. All you hear is, I'm like, ah! It was going so fast, I couldn't get my hand away from the reel, and it's just bloody in my knuckles. And he goes, you dumbass! And he hits it, and then it goes, I heard spools scream on TV, but I never had a spool scream on freshwater fishing before. So all of a sudden, my spool just, and my hand's bleeding. He's like, pay attention, forget your hand. So all of a sudden he goes, he's going to spool you if you don't turn him. And I couldn't turn it. My rod wasn't long enough. I didn't have the power. And thank God it turned. So now it went back in the harbor. So here's my little ass. The guys know me. I'm only 5'8". And I'm running. And thank God I was young. I'm just running and jumping down this break log trying to get line back. And it took about 20 minutes. And it was about a 20-pound female. And it was the most amazing fish. But yeah, and he just looks at me. He's like, you dumbass. And my hand, every knuckle was bloody on my right hand. It was pretty bad.
I can't get over the excitement. All we did was start talking about salmon fishing, and I'll tell you what, you sounded so excited telling your story, which is so awesome. But that's exactly what salmon fishing is all about. It's very exciting.
Right, you go from pitch quiet to just talk to your buddies to all of a sudden anarchy. You know, it's just, it's insane. And when you go casting, you don't land everything. And I've seen salmon just take off straight and completely spool guys' reels.
Right.
Just, we're like, slow him down, I'm trying, you got to turn him, he's not turning, you're running out of line, snap, and it's gone. You know, it's just, and then, you know, here guys, you know, you have nights where you don't catch anything, you have nights where you hook a bunch and don't land one, and then you have things in between, but there you have lots of guys who are like, yeah, they're all like, you know, like talking about sports, yeah, I went 2 for 12, I went, you know, 6 for 14, I went, you know, 1 for 4, you know, you lose a lot of them, and it's just, they're gigantic, you know, it's exhilarating, they're huge, and, a lot of guys casting, they're doing it at night. When I say casting, they're usually in the harbors. So, you know, you got some of the harbors downtown. You got Milwaukee Harbor, Racine Harbor is where I used to go. Some guys used to cast or fish skein, which is fish eggs on the mouth of the pike out. And usually casting comes first. So they come in from the lake getting ready to spawn, and guys start nailing them casting. Then they move into rivers.
Right. Yeah, my first shore salmon was Waukegan. And the first time I ever went to the salmon stop, when I went to the salmon stop, it's a bait shop. It's tackle, everything you want. It's been there for years and years. And when I went in there, I was in heaven. It's just an old place, and the people are very friendly. But when I went there, you know, ever since I was talking about the little Cleos, remember, from the trout?
Yep.
I got a giant Cleo spoon from Salmon Stop, and I'll be damned, I casted that thing, and I don't know how many times I casted it, but wham! My first salmon from shore was on one of their spoons.
And it's weird when you feel how huge and how strong they are. And yeah, what freaked me out the most, though, coming from, you know, regular freshwater fishing to casting for salmon, is you're just casting in this vast abyss. Right. You know what I mean? You're not aiming at anything. There's no structure, and it's hard to wrap your head around that you're just casting into nothingness, basically.
Right.
And you're trying to find active fish that are all different heights. That was hard for me to get used to, you know. And I'm looking at my buddies. Is there anything else I can be doing? They're like, nope, just keep chucking. You know.
That's right. You have no idea where it's going. You have no.
Right. So what lure did you have you hooked the most salmon on casting?
Spoons.
Yeah, me too. Little Cleos. Then the Cotton Cordell Rippling Redfish.
Yes.
Jointed chartreuse rapalas, the big size, or J9s.
Didn't have any luck with that. I only northerns at Mallard on those.
And then crocodiles, I've caught some, but not a lot. But a lot of guys love crocodiles.
Tell them what a crocodile is.
A crocodile is it's another kind of spoon. It's long and narrow. Mostly, I think they're made almost specifically for salmon. They're kind of like a cyclops, which is a mep spoon. Right. Those are okay, but those are more based for northern. See,
and
crocodiles,
muskies
right?
Too.
Crocodiles are meant more for salmon. They're heavier. They're so if you've seen a cyclops, it's kind of like a cyclops.
It's really a lot of trolling.
Right, you know, if they use them for trolling, but we cast them from shore, and then a lot of different crankbaits, just random crankbaits work, you know, and it's just you got to buy some good quality swivel snaps. Or you're going to be tying a lot because you're constantly changing. You know, you're doing something about 30, 40 times, and you're switching. But it was one of the cool things, Marty. Did you ever do it at night when the guys were using the glow in the dark, and you see and it's a busy night, you see all the little flashes going all over the place?
No.
Oh, it's awesome. We were up in Racine, and it was a busy night. There was guys on both sides of the harbor mouth, guys all up and down the rocks, and we had gotten there early, but it was like a little tiny fireworks show because all these guys were you have like a little portable flash unit, and I still have mine. I still use it all the time, and a lot of salmon baits you can get flatfish, crocodiles, little Cleos, rattle traps. They all sell a glow in the dark version. And yeah, you just all of a sudden you see you see these flashes, and you look and you see these flashes going all up and down the rocks. That was pretty neat. Yeah, that was I loved that night, and I think that night I went 3 for 8.
Oh wow!
You know, and most of my fish were on a glow in the dark Cleo though. You know, I've had most of my luck on Cleos. Now some guys will also throw out, you know, just like you do for browns, you know, floats with skein or floats with with a crawler, you know what I mean? Or a lot of guys use Play-Doh on the bottom, and they do that in the rivers too. But most of it's casting, and then it moves to the rivers. And Marty, did you ever do the rivers?
Oh yeah, but I used salmon eggs.
So did you float them or fish bottom?
Bottom.
Now, did you ever fly fish at all?
Not for salmon, no. Mm-mm.
All right. So when you fished for bottom, what kind of rig was it? Was it just like a Lindy rig, Wolf Rip rig?
Absolutely. And I must admit, I also caught a hell of a lot of suckers fishing with salmon eggs on the bottom. Yeah, I mean, you're going to run into that, of course.
Right. I had started using floating spawn sacks, and then I was lucky enough that this guy Ed was a seasoned salmon fisherman, so he got me to buy my first fly rod. So I bought a 7/8 fly rod, and there's a reel called a Martin reel, and the reason he had me get the Martin reel...
Is that named after me?
Yeah, it was the Marty Wacky reel.
Okay.
It's all crazy, and it's a very emotional reel.
It only works half the time.
and it casts bullshit. It's really cool. But no, the reason I got that reel is because you could put either mono for steelhead or fly line on it. But we would do fly fishing. Now, when you see fly fishing, it's not some lake in Montana where you're back and forth over your head with these little dry flies. It's a big line of guys roll casting. You're going up, and it's all woolly buggers, egg patterns, Montanas, a few different kind of streamers, a few big marabou kind of things. But, yeah, it's just a bunch of guys, and you're just roll casting, and the next guy goes, and the next guy goes, and the next guy goes, and you're always, it's not as crazy as in Alaska where guys are 2 feet apart. Average space between the guys is enough for you each to make a drift, so about, next guy down is probably 6 feet down from you.
Right.
There's some, we talked about on our last podcast, the jerks, trout fishing. They have nothing.
Nothing.
Oh my
like the
God.
Salmon jerks.
Oh my God, the salmon jerks. I mean, there is just guys that flat out break the rules right in front of you.
And Dan, I've seen that as fish prices go up, the jerks come out even more.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the terrible thing about it is and now they're talking about in certain states cutting back on the stockings, so they're going to be less. So now you're going to have less fish, and every year you get more jerks. And like I said before, the older I get, the less patience I have for this. Now, if you're a young guy and you have some extra dough and some extra time, you have to experience catching one of these salmons in this river. It's smaller than the DuPage. All right, so picture waiting, all right, and you flip this fly out of there, and it drifts down, all of a sudden it stops, and you set it, and, a 25-pound male king salmon just jumps up 3 feet in the air and just crashes at your feet, and it's just insane. Now, in order to do this, you have to be committed. You have to be a guy of character. You have to follow the rules, and there's some things you need to do to make sure. You have to get your license. You got to make sure that you get there. And there's a certain point at the Root River, anyway, that you can fish till at night, and then that stops, and there's an official start time. When I go, I leave in the middle of the night. We don't have breakfast. We don't sleep in. I'm standing in my spot to hold my spot on that river 2 hours before fishing time. So you can imagine how mad I get when some guy comes up and steps on it. Matter of fact, like I said, we've had some great times, and you can have some bad times. Well, if the weather doesn't go right, you don't get enough rain, you don't get a lot of fish, or you get some fish, and then you get mixed reports that there's fish, but you don't know how many. So if you're a guy like me without a lot of time, there's a lot riding on it. I have like 1 day saved a vacation. I'm spending money I don't have. Usually talk Steely Pete into going with me. We're all excited, but you got to have your license. You got to get your spot. Then there's got to be fish in the river, and they got to be. You want some, at least some that are somewhat fresh, and then you got to have water. And then you're praying that you don't have too many jerks. So a lot of things need to line up. But I'll tell you what, when you hook one, Marty, you can't explain it. They're like humongous catfish that can fly.
When the bite is on, you'll never, ever, you'll always remember it. You'll always, because even the ones that you miss, it's so intense. Just
burned vividly into your head. I have my best day ever. Now they have little nicknames for different places, but I was by this one giant slab of concrete, and it was a nice current break, so it didn't hit my legs. And I actually caught so many the one day where I actually just looked at the guys around me. I said, "I'm done." And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "I'm done. I couldn't feel my arms." I'm like, I'm done. And I was young, and I mean, and in shape. And I mean, my elbows and biceps and triceps were just burnt from fighting these 20-pound fish, and the water was high and trucking too, so it was big current. And I must have hooked 20 fish that day, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I did notice, though, there are an awful lot of people that aren't prepared, and they have the wrong equipment, and their fish break off just as soon as they hit. That's sad.
That brings me to the rant I'm about to go on. There is some unwritten rules about fishing in rivers, and some guys will disagree with me adamantly, but I think this needs to be said, especially for guys that do break the rules and they hear this. I wrote a set of rules for the Root River, and it's because, like I said, the older I get, the less patience I have, and if there's less fish, guys should know the basic rules so they don't I've seen fist fights break out. I mean, it gets that intense. Now, so these are the rules, all right? Number 1, don't be stupid. Number 2, if you want to if you want a good spot, get your ass out of bed early and claim one. All right, now this number 3 is a big one.
And don't think that you deserve the spot just because your dad was some Indian up in Wisconsin or something.
Just because it's a public waterway? No.
That I was being silly, but you're right.
And then you
don't own the spot.
Big one, all right. If there's a fishing hole, you do never ever, especially if somebody's fishing it, walk through it. Salmon will scatter out of that hole, and you'll trash it for hours. You have to walk around the hole. It's not like
I hate that.
It's not like when you're river fishing and you're drifting down through a hole. No, everybody's fishing parallel to the hole. Nobody's walking through the hole.
And you get stomping like Herman Munster right through it.
Pummeled, the poor bastard. He didn't know any better. And there was like 8 of us lined up in this hole. And this guy comes with this, like with a rod. He knew it was the wrong kind of rod with a big spoon. He walks right through the hole past all these fly fishermen. I'm like, oh, God. And there it went. And the guy was like, they started screaming at each other, fight right there. Fish were gone for a few hours. It was terrible. So do not walk through a hole. Number 2, you are not allowed to snag them in any way. All right, also, if you snag a fly in a hole and you got a bunch of guys fishing, if you can afford a license, if you can afford the gas to get there, if you can afford, your gear, you can afford to lose a few flies. Right. So if you snag that fly in a hole, don't go in there and spook the fish and get your stupid little fly back. Break it off. Right. All right, number 5, don't be stupid. Again, I want to keep that's a very important rule. Number 6, which we just talked about, do not sleep until 8. Have a nice breakfast. Expect to walk up and squeeze into one of the top spots. And if you need to see rules 1 and 5 again, don't be stupid. Refer to those things. Do not be stupid. All right. Number 7, you cannot, under any circumstances, keep a fish that's foul hooked. All right. This is real. Right. They have to be hooked in the mouth. So what happens is, like, picture, a lot of bites. Picture the river being high and these fish being fresh, which means they're nice and strong. You get some dork that hooks a fish in the tail and thinks he's going to be able to drag it back against the current while 7 guys sit there and wait. You're wasting everybody's time. You can't take it. It's illegal. Break it off, genius. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Marty, have you seen these guys that sit there and try to tow in a tail hook salmon for like an hour?
Oh, yeah. Or they snag it or whatever.
And there's fish limits for a reason. So don't steal, sell, net, harpoon, or snag them in any way. And that brings me up to a funny story, Marty. I'm sitting there, and there's 2. I've been fishing next to this one guy. He's like 6'2". I didn't even know, but he's a real nice guy. He knew, you get guys that know what they're doing. They've been there. They have some respect, and we're taking turns. No problem. This guy comes late, and I saw him out of the corner of my eye. I figured I'm just going to ignore him. And he kind of like, all right, so if I'm drifting from left to right, he basically took the whole left out of my drift. So now I just had right to center, so I couldn't even get a full drift anymore. And I don't know if you could picture this, but he was like flipping it out, Marty, and then pulling it back real fast. Right. So he wasn't drifting. He was letting it, and he's pulling it back. So basically he's sitting there trying to snap this fly, into these fish's face. So I say, you know what, don't snag him. And I think he was Polish. And he stood up. And
ja mówisz po polsku nie dobrze.
And he kept standing up, Marty. And he kept getting bigger and bigger. And he looks at me and he goes, I know snag him. You snag him. F you. you know, and then I just looked at him like, oh, God, you know, I'm going to die, you know, and then the big guy next to me, he comes, I think it was Polish, and they start screaming at each other, and the guy who was going to kill me, he leaves. I'm like, what did you say? He goes, I told him that this kid has been in here since 2 hours before dark. He's busting his butt. He drove up here. He didn't sleep in, and, you know, you need to give him his spot back, and the guy left. So, you know, but, I mean, that's how intense it is. It's intense because these fish are so big, and they are so fun to catch. You know,
Right.
when the jerks go up so much and nobody's catching anything, then no, it's not worth it. But believe you me, if you get there on a good day, it's fantastic.
Yes, it is. And, you know, there's so many different places that you can go. And, you know, even if you didn't want to go to the shore fishing side of things, you can always get some really kick-butt charters on Lake Michigan, too.
Oh, yeah, and if you want to get away from the crowds, at least charters are going, you know, everything except ice. The charters are usually out there. You know, if you got the money and you want to avoid the crowds, I say go for it, man. I had a couple buddies go this year, and they just chipped in, you know, 2 of them. They each got their limit. They had a fantastic time.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And, you know, okay, charter fishing's different, but it's really, there's more to it than that. When you go with a group of people, there's a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, so you're watching your rods, and the captain's trying to, you know, get you to some good spots. I mean, my God, when that fish is on, that's what it's all about. And, you know, that's why I'm looking at a 22-pound salmon on my wall right now. And this is funny, is that my son, Brutus, that's his nickname on the site, of course, but I told him when he was 6 years old that, you know, he wanted to stuff this little bass that he caught in Wheaton. He wanted to put it on his wall. And I said, oh, no, we can't do that. We have to let him go. But if you catch a 20-pounder, I'll stuff it for you. Well, he caught this fish when he was 11. And it was over 20 pounds. And he goes, you told me. I had to have it stuffed. And it's on my wall right now.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's right here. And you know what? I'm glad I did, because that was an awesome day. And he remembered. So, and that was on the Real Magic boat, one of their maiden voyages, in fact. That was an awesome time.
Right. You know, and it is. It's a great time. So, I mean, my basis thing is, you know, don't be stupid. Follow the rules. You know, if there's no night fishing, don't night fish. If it says fish sanctuary, you don't go walking past the signs and fish up there. You know, if you can't snag them, you know, you don't snag them. You know, if you have a limit, keep your limit. You need a license, get a license. If somebody's there,
man, there's so many issues you're covering right now that there are people out there that just won't
and that's
do it.
What I'm saying, and I'm hoping some of these guys realize what jerks they've been. You know, I mean, if you come up and ask a guy nicely, hey, there's a room for me to get in? If he says no, go to the next one. But he was there first. It's his spot.
Right.
You know, and he earned it.
Right.
You know, just because guys, you know, look like a fisherman doesn't mean they are one. You know, they got to get some manners, you know?
Well, I do have something I do have an issue with you with something you said that I totally disagree. Completely.
What?
There is no way in hell I'm going to get up to do anything before I eat breakfast.
Well, then
you
oh
said
my God.
you
said
know three times.
Oh, I mean, I don't mean like don't eat breakfast. What I mean is these guys think they can sleep in till 9 and have this great breakfast and walk
spend all the time.
Popular spot on the river and think they're going to stand right next to you.
I was kidding.
That's what I mean. No, I mean, please eat breakfast because I don't want to be around you if you don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to be a crabby ass wacky. Oh, I didn't eat breakfast.
I would too. I would bitch the whole time if I
you
didn't eat.
Yeah, I mean, I always stop on the way too, but
I get it. I get what you mean.
Yeah, just don't kick back and think you're just gonna it's your right to come late and get everything you want. No,
well,
I mean,
thanks for those awesome stories, Dan, and don't forget that if you fish in the Racine, Waukegan area, don't forget to stop at Salmon Stop, because there's a little bit of history with DuPage Angler there that when we were actually called Fish Online Magazine, they didn't have any way to post their photos of all their clients, and they used our site before DuPage Angler to post all of their customers' photos. And so there's a little bit of history there, and it's an awesome place. And just go there, buy all your bait and everything, especially if you like to perch fish. They will tell you where they're hitting all the time. Without question, they'll tell you exactly where to go. But stop at Salmon Stop, and just keep in mind that those are our early routes.
Yeah, I mean, and there's just not there's only a couple stores that are bait stores that are even like real bait stores anymore, and that's one of them. I think there's another one at downtown. I mean, I love those old shops. The guys still have character. They're there early. They're open late. They have everything they're supposed to have. They know their product. They're good to their people.
And you can still smoke cigarettes inside.
And there's a sense of loyalty and pride.
I was kidding.
I know.
What I was trying to say is it's old-fashioned.
Right. You know what I mean? You're worth something to them. I mean, and you just don't find that anymore.
Yeah, I was just referring to the fact that they're old-fashioned and they love the old stories, and But
yeah, so guys, don't walk in there with a cigar. I heard we could smoke. That might be a bad thing. DuPage Angler said we could, light up in here. Party on, dude. Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, Dan, thanks for coming on the show tonight and talking about the salmon and
ranting about the salmon.
Yeah, ranting about the salmon.
What part of the show you listen to?
And but we'll talk next week. I think it's going to be a good one because it's going to have to do with Mallard Lake. So.
Yeah, so you guys, members, get together, get a few guys together. Go hit the lakefront, do some casting. If you guys can, hit the rivers and go up, you should really try it. They'll burn memories in for the rest of your life. If you hook one salmon and you have to put up with those jerks, it'll be worth it.
Exactly.
You'll live with that memory forever.
Well, thanks for DuPage Angling Network. Thanks for listening, and going to see you online on DuPageAngler.com and hopefully on the water real soon.
Have a great night, everybody.